Hey, what up, cuh? It's Mr. E here, and it's time to start tier listing some stuff. I promise this is tier list week, so we are doing no less than 4 tier lists this week. I've got this one you see in front of you here for all of the Arbites weapons, and then we also have one cooking up for all of the Arbites talents. That is usually a very in-depth video, but you guys tend to love them. And then I'm also going to be revisiting all of the ranged and melee weapons for all classes, since we've had a good number of changes since I last touched on either of those options like over 6 months ago, including the revamp of Ogren and the redesign or changing of some of his weapons, the introduction of the Arbites weapons, and of course the recent buff that came out with the Arbites update that buffed about 7 different weapon families. So that is all on the table, on the docket, coming your way this week. Let's first go ahead, before we start ranking stuff, talk about the tiers of categories I'm going to be putting stuff into here. At the very bottom, we have Do Not Bring. I really mean it, guys. Do not bring these weapons. They are just such a detriment to the team. They are stealing resources. They are wasting your time. You are going to be slamming your head into a brick wall trying to complete anything over uprising difficulty with this weapon equipped. So do not bring these weapons. If you've watched my content for any amount of time, you already know which weapons are going squarely in there. That's in the Arbites arsenal. These are crap. Then we have worse than similar options up here in the yellow. These weapons are just generally outclassed, right? They just have damage that's too low, swing patterns that aren't quite right. They just don't really contribute anything as compared to even standard weapons. They're just lower than normal. They're undertuned. And there's a couple that fall into this category, and I think they are definitely weapons that are in line for a bit of a buff. Then we have the standard weapons, right? These are weapons that I'm not going to argue with you if you want to bring these weapons, but these weapons aren't build defining, right? You really can't make a build that's revolving around these things that's going to be anywhere in like reasonable power levels. They might make a very, very meme sort of build. You could do like a meme sort of niche build design around them, but they suffer in one category or another, so I would rank them just kind of a neutral power level. Up here in the orange, we have weapons that are strong with the right support. So there are certain weapons, and I'll go ahead and spoil one of them that's going to go in this category, like the double-barreled shotgun, that can be very, very powerful with the right support from the tree or the right blessings on them, right? So for the Arbites, you can get a triple-barreled shotgun. You could run Castigator Stance. All of these things can bring this weapon that normally, honestly, wouldn't be all that strong, but it can bring it and elevate it at the right with the right conditions. So these are weapons that do have that capability and can be enabled by supporting things. And then, of course, we have meta up here. These are weapons that are just strong, strong, strong. Including them in your build is going to make your build more powerful. If you have one of the other options in your build and you swap out that option and put in a meta weapon, it's just going to be a better build as a result. This is due to having very good blessings, having very solid damage numbers, good swing patterns, all of those things, and of course utilities that a lot of these weapons have. So these are the weapons you really, if you are at all interested in building your own builds and being successful in pushing havocs, you want to be oriented towards the meta weapons. But there is actually a higher tier, guys. There is one weapon on this tree that is the new dueling sword. Oh, and also, you should sub to Mr. E. This is also in the top tier. You thought it would have been down here if you watched my previous videos. I snuck it in up there. I got you guys. But yeah, go ahead and sub. But there is one weapon amongst all of these, and some of you might have figured it out already, but this weapon is completely busted, and it is what I would consider the new dueling sword. They're going to nerf the dueling sword, and this is going to be one of the new best weapons in the game. I think it is very, very similar to a weapon that I will be ranking incredibly highly in the melee weapon tier list later this week. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit so that we can get everything in frame here, and we'll start right here at the top. Now, I am referencing a list that is on gameslantern.com so that I can tell you the actual names of these weapons, because good lord, like, knowing the stupid names of half of these weapons is ridiculous. But we have the Akatran Mark 9 combat shotgun right here, aka what used to be called the Cantrail. This is the fire shotgun. This is a very solid weapon. It recently got a buff to its damage numbers, to its not its magazine, but its ammo capacity overall, like the ammo reserves, and it has always had probably the best alternate fire, the special shell that you can put in it, no pun intended with alternate fire there, because it's got that fire. You can put burns on enemies, and the fact that you can put burns on enemies on a class like the Arbites is honestly pretty good, since the Arbites has lots of ways of making enemies get stacked up and grouped up and hold them still, and then you can just pump these rounds into them and light them all on fire. You can even put on Manstopper and shoot, what's the Flechette? I think it's Flechette or something. The one that applies bleeds on crits. This weapon also has really decent synergy with the Arbites because he's a very high crit class. He's got 23% just at like kind of a baseline, and then if you take the bottom left node, you can be at like 33% in that bottom left keystone. He's got some very, very strong crit, and crit enables a lot of the very powerful blessings of this weapon. However, I wouldn't say it's meta, right? It's going to get outclassed by other shotguns. You know which ones that are going to be up here, but I think it is definitely strong with the right support for this class. This weapon can make builds. You can make builds around this thing, and you're not going to feel like you're dragging down your team by bringing it. Then we have the Axeless Combat Axe, right? This is a member of the Combat Axe class. There are 3 weapons in this family, and this is the ugly duckling of them. This weapon it's just jank, right? It's like and I've said this before, it's like they came up with ideas for the Antax and the Rashad, the other 2 siblings that it has, and they said, okay, for the Antax, it'll be all about light attacks, and for the Rashad, it'll be all about heavy attacks. And then they said, okay, what is the Axeless's thing? And they were like, I don't know, just give it a random moveset that was generated by AI, and that's what this moveset is. It doesn't really have any good use cases that the Antax and Rashad don't cover, and yeah, so just don't use this thing. I would say it's not do not bring tier because you can still do fine damage with it. It has similar damages to the Rashad on some of its attacks, but it just has such terrible swing patterns that it really, really drags it down. I'm going to give it worse than similar options because it is pretty much the definition of that, right? It's outclassed by other weapons in its own family. Then we have our lovely one-handed shock maul here. This is the Agni. The Agni is the default shock maul, and this weapon is certainly meta. This thing is a very, very, very strong weapon on this class for a couple of reasons, right? It has access to the electrocuted buff, which is the blessing on it, and this blessing gives you 25% increased damage when you're attacking shock targets, and guess what this weapon always does when you're hitting with heavies? It always shocks the target. And you can cattle prod the enemies with the special on this thing, which shreds captain shields. This weapon is very, very strong. It suffers from low base damages, but it more than makes up for it with one blessing that is going to be on it and one other weapon that have, it's called Skull Crusher, right? You might be familiar with it. Skull Crusher increases the damage that enemies that are staggered by this weapon take by 40%. So this is a massive, massive like meat tenderizer for not only you but for the whole team. So having one of these on the team on an Arbites can soften up a boss, can prime a boss for absolute destruction for the next 4 seconds, and it's also just a generally very usable weapon. Honestly, I find myself liking it a lot. It's fast, it's fairly safe, it's got a cool special. Yeah, it's a solid weapon, and you will never go wrong bringing it. Plus, it has that weapon enabling damage from, or like sort of build enabling damage from Skull Crusher. So you can do things like with my Hunter build, where you prime with the Skull Crusher and you swap to your range weapon and you annihilate. We now have to talk about an infantry autogun right here. This is the Agrunpa, both of these are alphabetical by the way. The Agrunpa Mark 1 infantry autogun. So these infantry autoguns, they aren't really quite in the meta, right? They don't have enough armor penetration to deal with the sheer amount of like stuff that higher difficulties throw at you, and therefore I can't in all good conscience say that they could be anything higher than the standard tier. They just do not excel at killing anything that's carapaced. And if there's bulwarks or anything on the field, good fucking luck, right? That's the problem. That combined with the fact they have low collateral, there's no penetration, there's no cleave. The weapons that excel in ranged and all that stuff do their damage either very quickly without much time investment, or they have a lot of collateral and disruption and can get through the defenses that targets have. So the Agrippa infantry autogun, this is the slow firing autogun as I remember. I think that this one, unfortunately, I have to put into worse than similar options, since the best infantry autogun is no higher than the standard tier. Then we have our first Vigilant Autogun. Boom! Vigilant Autoguns go into D tier. Sorry, do not bring tier. Vigilant Autoguns are just such a forgotten weapon. These things are a relic of the 1.0 release of Darktide, before everything was power crept, before the game was changed. And these weapons were designed in an era when the game was going to be much more focused around like tactical gunplay, and you were going to be exchanging like fire with gunners from behind cover, and they were reasonable weapons at that time, but they have not scaled their power at all appropriately. They're attempting to be like sniper rifles with some sort of precision, but they have very, very shaky aim, and they have no sights, and they do piddly fuck for actual damage, and they have zero penetration. So you might be tempted when you see the Vigilant Autogun to be like, oh my gosh, this thing has perks or blessings that are like 100% extra weak spot critical hit points or critical hit damage, and if you stay scoped in, you guarantee a crit. So if I shoot enemies in the head, they'll get eviscerated instantly. There's like 15 other weapons in the class that can eviscerate enemies when you hit them in the head instantly. You don't need to bring this weapon that has a base damage of like 20 and try to do it. This is in the D tier, or the do not bring tier, because it is a waste of ammo. If you're shooting with this gun, you could be doing 100% more, 300% more with any other weapon with the same amount of ammo consumption. So don't bring this thing. We have to go on to the Agrippa Mark 7 combat shotgun. Okay, so my other two combat shotguns, where are they? I forget what the last one is called in terms of its code. Sorry, I'm looking over here on the right. Oh yeah, the Zerona. I think the Zerona's okay. I'm pretty certain that this is the one that I thought was more standard in my testing. The Agrippa is fine, right? It's just a very run-of-the-mill shotgun, but it doesn't bring anything special to the table that, like, you can't get somewhere else. I don't think you're going to be able to make a build around the Agrippa in any real way that you couldn't make around other weapons. So it's not exactly like a weapon that can be super enabled by that support like our flame shotgun can, just because that flame and that flame thing is very, very potent. It does have access to the same blessings, and I would say it's sort of at the top of the standard tier, but it's definitely not into that strong tier. I wouldn't say this is a strong weapon. Coming up next, we have access to the Agrippa Mark 8 braced autogun. Okay, so these braced autoguns, I don't know. I think this one has to be standard tier as well. In fact, while we're at it, let's also talk about the Graya braced autogun. These weapons, what do you want a ranged weapon for, right? A ranged weapon needs to be able to remove threats at range. These weapons fundamentally do not have range in any considerable way, and they aren't particularly good at like horde clear of stuff in front of you. They do okay at it, but for much of the purpose of these braced autoguns, which is like to spray down stuff that's in front of you, you could just be using your melee weapon instead, right? You could just like swap to melee and bludgeon this stuff instead of using ammo to do it. And I'm actually going to be putting out sort of a fun build the same day as I'm releasing this video, where it's like the Arbites with the AK, and it's fine, right? But I definitely could do the exact same thing, but just swinging a melee weapon around instead. But it's fun to shoot stuff, right? It's fun to go rat-tat-tat-tat. So I'll give them that they are decent. but they aren't really anything that I think you should be making a build around, and if you made a build around them, I wouldn't consider it a strong build. And I actually just classified the wrong one in there. I don't think that's the Graya, is it? I'm looking for... What's this? This is another infantry autogun. Where's my last one? Where is... I'm missing one? No, here we go, here we go. Okay, there's all the braced autoguns. There we go. So we've got the Graya, we've got the Agranpa, and then this last one is the Vrax autogun. I think, for my money, that the Vrax is the best one of the three, so I'll put it the closest to this side, calling it the best. The Vrax has always just worked the best for me. It has a really, really big magazine, but I can't rank it anything higher than the standard, right? You're just going to do better bringing other stuff. Sorry. Okay, moving past our braced autogun friends, we next have to look at the stub revolver. This one is the quick draw. We can go ahead and look at both while we're here. So the quick draw stub revolver, I think this thing is certainly in the A tier, the strong with right support tier. This weapon has really good crit ratios because of having just very solid damage, as well as critical strike chance, as well as just good penetration on the rounds. And this is the speed loader variant, so you can just put all those 6 shells in there and go boom boom boom, or 5 rather, and just fan the hammer into targets. I think it goes very well with a pairing of like high aggression sort of Arbites, and because the Arbites has good modifiers to headshots, and he also has a keystone that can highlight specialist and elite targets so that you can eliminate them, I think it kind of works really well with that. Now, I don't think it's anywhere near as good as its competitor. Personally, I am a big fan of the Zerona, the actual aiming stub revolver, the one where you aim down the sights and can snipe. I think this thing is in the stronger part of the strong with right support category. The problems that I have with these weapons is that there are other weapons that have similar sniping potential, have similar damage, have better armor penetration, and have more ammo. And there's a couple of them that I think fall into this category, and also the reload is just kind of very annoying and encumbering. So this weapon can be very strong. It's certainly very strong if you're going into that bottom left execution order keystone where you're needing to pick the blue targets every so often. But I just, again, feel like it's one upside is that you can pull this thing out very quickly and snap off a shot, but there are other weapons that can do the same thing and have more ammo capacity and also have additional buffs that we will need to talk about in a second. So that's where I'll rank my revolvers. I think they're both strong with the right support, but not in that meta tier by any stretch of the imagination. The Antax Mark V Combat Axe. This thing, I will say, is strong with the right support. This weapon is an unga bunga, like, just machine, right? If you are a new player to this and you want to use an axe instead of the clubs or whatever, just choose the Antax and light attack the entire mission. It's got such strong attacks on those lights that it's just going to chop through everything in one hit. It's got pretty decent blessings in the form of Shred and Headhunter and Brutal Momentum that'll keep you cleaving through hordes and get your damage nice and high. It's just a very solid, albeit incredibly boring weapon where you'll pretty much only use light spam ever. So that is the whole thing with the Antax. I don't think there's really anything else I need to say about it there. It's just a pretty solid melee weapon, but there are enough meta melee options in this class that I don't really think you'll have any reason to bring it. Alright, next up, we've got our tack axes. Ooh, all 3 of them here. So I'll say that these tack axes recently got a buff, right? And they are very good. These weapons have always been pretty dang good, but they aren't all quite created equally. What I'll say is I think that this one, which is the Atrox Mark II, is probably strong with right support. Right, these weapons are strong because they have good critical ratings. They do lots of damage on crits, and they attack very quickly. And this class has good synergy, as we mentioned before, with crits, and he has good synergy with capitalizing on opening up enemies. And, these weapons die against like crushers that you can't stagger, or bulwarks that you can't get past their shield. But this class has no problem with that. You just charge into them. Now they're staggered. Now their shield is open, and cut them apart in like 2 seconds. But this is the weakest of the 3 options for the tack axes. It just doesn't have any good swing patterns, and its damage is therefore lacking because you can't access some of the very powerful heavy attacks. Now we have to talk about these other 2 options. These are both meta options. They aren't as strong for my money as, you know, including a build with the shock maul. But if you're looking for a weapon that isn't a maul, these weapons are very, very good. I bet they're going to be insane on the Zealot when I get around to making these builds with that. These things will chop up enemies in no time. They have an obscenely fast time to kill. Like, they do crazy, crazy DPS. And the buffs that happen to them move them into the highest category for mobility. So these weapons have the mobility tier ninja now in the game files, and therefore they can move as fast as the dueling sword. Albeit they don't have any movement tech like the dueling sword, which allows you to like sling yourself across the frickin' room. They have like only slight speed ups on their attacks. But we have the Mark 7 here with the big beard on it. This thing is the heavier hitting, slower attacking one. This is definitely a strong contender and can do a lot of damage, right? A crit hit will lop the heads off of just about anything. And then over here, we have probably the most buffed up one out of all 3 of these options, thanks to the new update, which is the Mark 4. The Mark 4, it recently, well, these weapons all together got a buff to the armor penetration, or the carapace armor damage modifier, when they are doing certain attacks. So there are 3 attacks that got a buff for this, right? There's a straight overhead chop, there's an uppercut, and then there's a diagonal down right chop. So the straight overhead and the uppercut, those 2 got a very sizable buff to the damage that they do into carapace. And then the sideways sort of diagonal chop got about half of that much buff. So those 3 attacks, if your weapon has access to those attacks very easily, you get big points, because if you land a crit on a crusher or a mauler when you're using one of those attacks, it's going to take about half their health bar. And this new Mark IV has both the overhead chop and the uppercut on heavy 1 and heavy 2. So if you manage to crit both of those, you can go heavy 1, heavy 2 within the course of like 1.5 seconds and drop the crusher. It's very, very, very strong that it has access to those. And then its light attacks are just flailing the axe back and forth. Like it's just whipping it around randomly. So it just chops through hordes, no problem. Yeah, it's got very, very solid boss DPS, and they kind of shored up its one weakness with that chop action. All right, so there's our tack axes out of the way, and it's time to talk about the Branks. The Branks Mark III, Arbites Shock Maul. This is the new dueling sword, guys. This weapon is fucking stupid. I don't know how they balanced or designed this weapon. This weapon has a base damage on light attacks of 250. The heavy attacks do 350. It has as much attack speed as the Agni Shock Maul does, and it does twice the damage on its base attacks. Then we have to talk about the blessings on it, right? It does have access to the electrocution damage, so you'll be able to get 25% extra damage when you're attacking targets that are shocked, which just so happens to be every target that you ever land a heavy attack on. And it has access to what is it, like, fuck, what's the blessing called? Oh, I can just open it up here so I can see the blessings. The blessing is called Relentless Strikes, that adds strength on subsequent hit. So this thing ends up doing just stupid boss damage if you continue attacking the same target. Not as much boss damage as some other options in the tree, but like it allows you to hit a crusher, I think 4 times with light attacks, and they can die, which is just quite absurd for a weapon that can attack this fast. I'm not done yet. It also has an absurdly strong swing pattern. So you have a heavy 1 overhead that's a slam that will hit the head of pretty much any target you target, and that instant kills everything except for Ragers maulers, and crushers. With ragers, if you follow up that heavy attack with your weapon special, the rager instantly dies. Because that, oh, and I forgot the bulwarks as well. But because the first heavy attack shocks enemies, and the weapon special comes in with a light attack that follows the light attack 1 swing pattern, and it hits enemies, and if those enemies are already shocked, it electrocutes them, and it does like 1,000 damage. So if you can hit a charging rager with the heavy 1 here, and then hit them with that shock attack, and just walk away, because now they're paralyzed and they'll be electrocuted until they die. We also have obscene damage and utility on the light attacks, right? I mentioned the light attacks are 250. The light attack swing patterns are just alternating left-right sweeps with like I think it's like diagonal upright, diagonal down, like up left, and then an uppercut sweep. But like they're all good. They're all good attacks that are very easy to hit where you need. And then of course you have the horde clearing pattern, which is the push stab sweep, and then heavy attack into sweep the other way, and then heavy attack again to sweep again. So you get 3 perfectly horizontal sweeps in a row, and then do a push stab and rinse and repeat. And that's just how you clear hordes. And it's one of the best horde clearing weapons. It's like the dueling sword, but with horde clear. And this thing will just absolutely pillage all the enemies in front of you. It is the absolute top of this class right now, and you'll play games with it, and it's so far above certain other weapons that you'll be like, I can't really justify using other weapons on the class. So it is just absurd. I'm certain there's something else I've missed about it, but yeah, it just has obscene damage, a really good swing pattern, it's really usable weapon special that can electrocute and paralyze enemies and keep like bulwarks open for you. Solid blessings all around her. This thing is going to be a problem. They probably definitely needs to be nerfed and brought in line, because it's just way too powerful as compared to other options in the class. Okay, well, that's enough gushing about that thing. We've got the 2 suppression shields coming up here. So this one on the left is the one that you start with, the Branks Mark 6, and this one on the right is the alternate model, the Branks Mark 11. So the Branks Mark 6, honestly, I'm going to give both these weapons the meta rating. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. These weapons have very strong base damage. They have base damage, at least the Mark 6 has base damage on par for the light attacks with our lovely club up here, and it just has some fairly usable swing patterns. Your heavy 1 is opening wide with the shield like slap to the left sort of thing that the Ogryn has. That's a really good swing pattern, and yeah, it's very solid, right? You can just spam with this thing. You can just walk into hordes and just spam heavy 1 and block reset every second. You can just flail the light attack around. The Mark 11 takes a little bit more tact to use properly. It has very heavy impact on a lot of its blows, and its heavy attacks follow very good patterns. So heavy attack 1 is the shield edge slam that like Ogryns use on heavy attack 1 for them, which I think is a really nice way to open engagements. But what really sets these weapons up very nicely is they have access to a free crowd control ability that's up like all the freaking time, which is the flashbang. The flashbang is very, very valuable. It can stop trappers or bombers or flamers or mutants, or even open up bulwarks and stop crushers from overheading. It can just pause everything in front of you. It doesn't like do a big CC, but it's an interrupt, it's a kick. It says, okay, everything that's going on in front of me right now, stop for 1 second or like 0.5 seconds. And that usually is enough time to position yourself where you need to be positioned, or start getting up an ally that needs to be gotten off the ground. Both of these weapons having that extra utility on top of the solid damage potential they have is top of the line, and this isn't even considering anything about the blessings or the fact that you can block with these things. You can block range attacks. So we've got a couple of blessings that are pretty decent. As per usual, we've got electrocute on here. Again, heavy attacks always electrocute, so once you've electrocuted a target, all follow-up attacks are going to do 25% extra damage. That is a very, very strong blessing that a lot of the weapons in the class have access to. And then, of course, you've got the rending on staggered enemies called Opportunist. Very solid blessing in its own right, because a lot of the problems you'll have with this weapon is dealing with those heavy crusher and mauler threats. And then one of my favorite ones is the, what is it? I forget what the blessing is called. I'll look it up. I've got it right here. It's called Lightning Reflexes, which gives you a shock to targets when they attack your shield and you perfect block them. There's honestly a lot of synergy with perfect block in the Arbites tree. I don't know if it's like exactly a meta build, right? It's better to generally to be offensive than it is to be defensive, but you can get some crazy attack speed out of perfect blocking with this class, and this thing also gives you 25% melee strength for 3 seconds and electrocutes the enemy that attacked you, so it opens them up to counter attacks. And it can happen to demon hosts, and I think it even happens to bosses as far as I'm aware. They'll get knocked back and stunned for a second, so very powerful, allows you to tank, and you can also use this shield to block sniper shots, and sniper shots and bullets and all that stuff, no problem. So very, very usable in that regard. Definitely not a bad weapon to have in any build. Then we've got our chain swords. Sorry, chain swords, you're going down here. Chain swords just aren't it, right? They are weapons that I would quantify or qualify as being version 1.0 weapons, right? They had most of their changes early on. They were balanced around an early state of the game when, like, yeah, sawing stuff with the chainsaw might have honestly been a good investment in your time in terms of DPS in the early state of the game, when you were like, okay, I need to kill this crusher. Oh, well, I have the chainsword. I can like saw him down, and that'll be a good amount of DPS on this crusher. Crushers are scary. Not these days, though, right? Instead of revving up this chainsaw and hitting an enemy and being stuck to them and not able to move yourself appropriately for the next like 1 whole second, just bring the shock maul, or bring either shock maul and hit them over the head. They are now staggered and stunned backwards, and then hit them over the head again, and then they are dead. Like that's how it works with the other weapons on the class. Even the weapons that don't stagger like that, like the tack axes, they can finish off targets way quicker than these chain swords can. So the real problem that I have with these things is their damage overall is very underwhelming for the amount of time you have to commit to their weapon special, and their attacks outside of their weapon special are even more underwhelming, because this is a problem that I think Fat Shark has when they're designing these weapons with activatable abilities that they have rectified, especially with the Arbites, right? They have rectified it, and they've made it so that, you know, the suppression shield and the new shock maul and all these weapons have special abilities, and their weapon attacks are very potent, right? You're not losing anything by, there's no trade-off here. And that was the thing they did in the early design of the game, is I think they were afraid that activatable abilities on weapons were going to be like crazy OP. And so they tuned down the stats of the weapons, the baseline of the weapons, and made it so that really you have to be using that activatable ability a lot in order to get effectiveness out of them. And the same thing applies to like the power sword, right? The power sword is fucking useless if it's not powered up, which doesn't make any sense, right? It's still a sword. It should be able to cleave through things like the Katachan Devil's Claw does, but for some reason it's nerfed to the fucking ground until you turn the thing on. I guess they forgot to sharpen it. So I think this weapon falls into the same trap of like its base damages are super low because it gets this special saw attack, which they thought would be like a big deal, and it just is not a big deal. Okay, we've got another Vigilant Autogun, D tier. Do I need to talk anymore about these, or do you guys fucking get it at this point? These things are just useless. Like, what's the point? They do 0 damage, Z DPS. They are just like, no, they have poor sound design is another thing that irritates me. I know that people will like laugh at me probably for like bringing up sound design in a tier list for these weapons, but like that does matter, as we're about to talk about, right? Weapons that sound and feel powerful get extra points. Like, you can fool yourself into thinking a weapon is more powerful if it just like feels powerful. These weapons feel like they are made of like cheap plastic. They are just shit feeling. They are shit to use because they have no sights and they do fucking 0 damage. They waste ammo. Get the fuck out of here with that trash. We have the Columnus Auto Gun. This is a standard weapon. You know, the Columnus, man, they switched up these names like a while ago, right? Is this the medium fire rate firing one? It's fine, right? It's just like a it fires some bullets down range. It gets a good amount of damage done. but it's nothing really too crazy. Let's go ahead and grab the last one we're at it. I'm also going to be putting the best autogun, the best infantry autogun into this category. This is the Vrax infantry autogun. The Vrax is the best infantry autogun because it has the best multiplier on critical hit, because when you fire a crit and get a crit, it multiplies the number of bullets you effectively shoot, and it has good precision, has good mag size, good damage, and it has good blessings. It's a pretty solid weapon all around. It's just that all three of these infantry autoguns suffer with the same problem, which is that they are single target elimination tools that do not work on some of the more important single targets, right? You can eliminate shotgunners and gunners with them just fine, but you can't eliminate crushers with them, and you can't kill maulers with them. And if you do want to kill something that's like high priority with them, you're going to be wasting way more ammo than you would on comparable options. So your choices for killing a gunner with this gun is to pull it out, aim down the sights, and shoot off maybe 6 rounds to kill a gunner, because you can't have perfect accuracy with these things because they are kind of shaky, and they don't really have enough ammo to go around to spray down a horde, and they don't have the penetration like the braced autoguns do to hit more than one target in that horde. So they're not for that. They are for running and gunning, and then it's shoot, spray down that shotgunner, keep moving, spray down that gunner, keep moving. They do really good DPS, but they are not efficient in their ammo consumption. So if you're going to be using a weapon like this, it's oriented around picking targets, I would say just use the revolver instead. It comes out just as quick. You can have just as much mobility, just as much headshot damage and precision, and all that good stuff. Let's start going out of order a little bit here so I can wrap up some of the weapons that I hate. Vigilant autoguns, get the fuck out of here. I don't know. I'm gonna put this in standard. I don't understand why this second shock maul exists. Maybe I'm missing something here. I've played games with it. I've done testing with it in the Psychanium. I feel like this one is just better in every conceivable way. The Agni is just so much better than its little brother. So yeah, and also I don't like the way this weapon looks. So yeah, this weapon is just gonna be standard. It gets access to all the same blessings and stuff. It's just, why would I use this over this one at all? Let's grab our last shotgun. I think this is also a B tier. Both of these non, what used to be called the Zerona, both of the, not Zerona, Cantrail. This used to be the non-flame shotgun ones are just standard, right? Because what they're intended for, one of them is a slug and one of them is a duckbill shot, which is like a horizontal spread shot. So those two things that you can do with these guns, they can be mimicked by another weapon we're about to talk about, and when they're mimicked, it's way better. So why use these over the other options that are just better, is what I'm saying. So if you want to bring a shotgun that shoots slugs, you just bring the other shotgun that we're about to talk about that's a fucking sniper rifle. And if you want to bring the one that is a street sweeper and can shoot horizontally, you bring the other shotgun that's just annihilates entire hallways full of shotgunners and gunners. Okay, the Rashad. Let's just grab this, the Rashad Combat Axe. This is a meta weapon, honestly. This thing, go into the Psychanium, if you have the creature spawner, or just go into a game, find a boss, just start heavy attacking. Just heavy attack him in the head repeatedly, and watch his fucking health bar. It's stupid. It does 6,000 damage on a headshot. It is absurd what this weapon does on repeated chops like that. I have no idea what it is that multiplies that makes the damage that high. I think it's because this weapon has a combination of both the first strike, finesse, and damage statings on it. So you just get this weapon that obliterates on the first attacks. This was already one of the best single target weapons in the game, especially when we were in the pre-dueling sword era. You'd see veterans and stuff who didn't have access to the dueling sword running this weapon and just deleting crushers. This is a very, very solid weapon. I don't think I can fault you for using it, and it's definitely your boss killingest melee weapon on the class if that's what you want to be focused around. We've also got our Shredder pistol here. Let's put Shredder Pistol in C tier, right? If you want to run with the Shredder Pistol, just run with Infantry Autogun. I don't understand. Like, the Shredder Pistol, they attempted to buff it recently. Not like super recently, but kind of recently. And it still doesn't really have an identity that I think holds all that much value, right? You can now run and gun with it, but that's not how you would want to use it, because when you are sprinting and shooting, you can't aim down sight. You can't steady your aim, and enemies can shoot you. So what you should be doing with it is sprinting and then sliding, aiming down sights while you're sliding, and then spraying. And that isn't anything that they added. You could always do that. So I think that like adding that little gimmick to it isn't really all that creative or all that useful for its overall stats or its overall use case. Its stats did get buffed with the recent patch. I think it got like 25, 30 something % damage and more ammo and stuff like that, but it still just isn't on the par with things like the Vrax auto gun if you're just going to be running and gunning while shooting ammo fast, right? I can't really think of a build that I would want to make around this weapon for this class, because if I wanted to do something like Terminus Warrant, where I'm stacking up my range stacks very quickly, or my melee stacks by shooting in range very quickly, I could use this, but I could also use the Vrax auto gun and get more benefit out of it and shoot faster. So this weapon still needs some help in order to find its relevancy. Okay, we're getting down to some really good ones in the last little bit here. We've got our shield with the shot pistol. I don't think that this weapon is meta. I think that because the range slot has a few options that can go in it that are very, very strong in this class, I think by bringing this option, you are depriving yourself of those options. So yeah, I think that I'm gonna have to put it in the strong with right support tier. It's useful, right? It's useful to be able to block attacks with the range weapon that you have, right? Sometimes that'll save you in a pinch, so that's pretty good. But the weapon associated with it itself, I think, is really quite lacking. It's fun on lower difficulties. It does solid damage when you're at like short to medium range, but it has such an insane damage fall off. And the only thing that can really mess with Arbites, especially if you're going Douglas, is long range threats. Gunners, snipers, those sort of things. Those are the threats against the class, and having a ranged weapon that can remove them is very, very valuable. And this weapon can't really do that in an effective way. It's fun to use as a hybrid brawler where you're in there and you swap this weapon really quickly and you blast them with the shot pistol, but that's also really made difficult because of how long the reload animation is and how small the magazine is. It's only 5 shots, and then you got to reload for what seems like all day. Blocking with the weapon while that's going on too, by the way, pauses the reload, so you can't even like block and reload. I think maybe just changing that about it and making it so that you could reload behind the shield, which would make sense, right, would honestly bring this weapon up a little bit. I don't think it necessarily needs to be brought up in power. I just think that would be something that would make it a lot better and more natural feeling to use. So it's not my favorite weapon in the class. In fact, I think it's my least favorite class-specific weapon, but it's there and you can use it and you won't like hurt your build by using it. Let's talk double-barreled shotgun. As I mentioned at the beginning, double-barreled shotgun is going into the strong with right support category. This class has access to the 15% increased magazine capacity rounded up, so turning this double-barreled shotgun into a triple-barreled shotgun. It also has castigator stance, which can reload 1 shell every time you get a kill, every 1.5 seconds. It's also a class that is really, really good at getting into enemies' faces and opening them up and blasting them with damage and stagger and all that stuff. And it has good synergy with crit. This class is a crit monster, and this weapon loves crit because of blessings like Manstopper that can cleave through multiple enemies. It's a solid weapon. I'm going to put it in the strong right support category because I do think there's weapons that outclass it, but if you build around it specifically, you're going to have a pretty solid build, right? You could go check out I haven't made one myself just yet, but I did help First Year Guardsman make his, and I think it's a pretty good build. It's definitely fun, and this weapon, by the way, it pumps numbers. You will have big numbers if you run double-barreled shotguns. Same with you if you run really any shotgun build, especially the last two we're about to talk about. These things pump serious fucking damage, you know, per shot. They cleave hordes, they cleave shotgunners and gunners and all that stuff. It just falls down a little bit when you're tasked with killing some of those larger targets, those crushers and all that good stuff. Okay, and let's do the last melee weapon here, guys. We've got the crusher. The crusher is a meta weapon. It isn't the best weapon, right? It does have its downsides. The downsides to the crusher being it is pretty slow to swing, and it does have an odd swing pattern, so for players that aren't the most experienced at the game, it can be hard to wrap your head around. As compared to the new dueling sword up here, this thing is stupid, right? And a moron could pick this thing up and learn the swing patterns within like one game, and then, you know, top DPS from there. The crusher, on the other hand, you have to know that the push stab light that comes out is one of your most damaging attacks, especially into metal. You have to know to block cancel for heavy ones repeatedly in order to just dunk on bosses and dunk on crushers and stuff like that. You have to know when to use your charge attack, if ever. Some players like don't really even prefer it all that much. And yeah, it's just a complicated weapon, but it does have really, really solid blessings, and it synergizes very well with the class in that the class loves stagger. This weapon has Skull Crusher, so it loves stagger. This weapon also just really capitalizes on enemies that don't have any defenses against it, that are laid out and are waiting for it to be executed on the floor. It's very strong, and this weapon also excels when it's being given a bunch of attack speed, which this class has anywhere from between 20 and 35% extra attack speed depending on your build. So yeah, this weapon can be swung around quite fast. So definitely a meta choice for you there. And we have counting. Let me see, 1, 2, 2. Okay, I don't know how many weapons this is, but however many weapons this is, guys, this is how many we have left. Let's talk about our shotguns. So we have the Mark III and the Mark VIII. The Mark III is the Street Sweeper, and the Mark VIII is the Sniper Rifle. Both of these weapons are meta. The Street Sweeper shotgun has crazy stupid damage, especially when partnered with things like close quarters killing, or whatever, it's a kill frenzy and that stuff. You can really pump your damage to some obscene levels, and then after you're done killing close range targets, just aim it a little bit farther away, and anything up to medium range is just going to die in like one pump of this thing, which is very nice to be able to pull out these shotguns, which pull out very quickly, and just fire one round for free, and just for free. Why did I say for free? Just fire one round and deal with the target. Now, speaking of for free, these weapons also have these special shells that I always forget to use on top. And so this variant, the Mark III variant, has electrocution shells. So you can slot one of these in. They are free. You get 6 of them every time that you reload your ammo. Even a small ammo pack will give you 6 more. And these shells will hit the targets in front of you, and they will apply the electrocution effect. So they'll take some damage, and they will be paralyzed for the duration. This is a great way when you're coming in on an enemy to open them up and just be like, nope, Crusher, you don't get, like you get a bulwark that's in front of you who's turned around. You know, as soon as you get close to melee, he's going to turn around and block you. Shoot him in the back with an electrocution shell. He doesn't ever get to turn around. He dies before anything happens. So it's a very usable weapon, has very solid damage. It's a fun weapon, and it has an amazing sound design and game feel. This thing feels amazing to use, and its reload is snappy. You don't feel like you're sitting there reloading all damn day. If you need to, you can reload just one shell and pump another shot out, and it's not that bad, honestly. Comparing to its brother in arms, the Mark VIII, the sniper rifle of shotguns, this thing is fucking stupid how damaging it is. It has seemingly a very high minimum pellet count, so like you'll cross map a sniper, and if they get nicked by one pellet, they die. This thing is an absolute laser beam, and it also has special shells that apply brittleness to targets. So when you see a crusher that's waiting up ahead, just go ahead and load a special shell and blast them in the head, and then he'll die in like the first melee attack because his armor's been reduced so much. So this weapon is very, very strong because just aiming at chest level, or like sort of a mixing like between the head and the chest in your aiming reticle there, results in an instant kill on pretty much all targets. So you have, I think they get like 70 ammo, right? So there you have 70 gunners or 70 shotgunners that are killed by this, and that is a very, very effective way to use ammo. Not to mention it comes out very quickly and tends to have very good penetration into hordes. Both of these weapons cleave through hordes like nothing else. So if you see the outline of a trapper, say you got execution order on, and you can see the trapper through the crowd, you can just pull this thing out and shoot in his general direction. Most times it'll just level the crowd in front of him and kill the trapper. So both of these weapons are absolutely meta tier, which I'm very glad, because they're weapons that sort of fall into use because they're exclusive to the class, right? It's awesome that the weapons that are exclusive to the class are all up here, right? It would have sucked if there were weapons that they made for this class that were really bad. We've got 2 more weapons left. First we got the bolt pistol. I think this weapon is strong with the right support. I think this is the perfect definition for it, right? And I think this would be the appropriate time to also talk about the bolter, which is going to go into the meta tier. In fact, it's kind of at the higher end of the meta tier. I didn't actually rank these kind of really in the order that they should be, but it's probably something like this. So these weapons, the bolter and the bolt pistol, they have a lot of ammo. The bolt pistol has about 85 ammo. The bolter has 115 ammo. The bolt pistol comes out very, very quickly. It has high precision, and it has a magazine of 8, I want to say. And it's just a nice little sidearm, right? I think it's a direct competitor to the revolver here. I think I would prefer it. I definitely prefer it over the revolver because of what we're about to talk about. But this weapon is like just kind of an upgrade over the revolver because of the magazine reload and because of just the damage that it can do to targets. It has a very solid amount of penetration on it already. You can kill a Reaper in 2 shots with it. And then we have to talk about the blessings that it has access to. So this thing has access to 2 blessings that are probably of interest to you no matter what your Arbites build is. One is Puncture. Puncture applies bleed stacks when an enemy is hit by your range damage. So this means that you can use this weapon to do some pretty sizable damage to bosses, because 16 stacks of bleed, which is the bleed cap, is a good trickle of damage, especially when you got them softened up with some extra damage taken thanks to stagger. So you got that damage there, and you've also got explosion radius. I can't remember what the blessing is called. Big Dom, you're watching this video right now. Tell me what that blessing is called that increases the radius of your explosions on your pistol. But this thing increases the radiuses of all explosions by 25%. So if you are running a Douglas build and you got this in your secondary, your impact grenades now have a 25% increased radius, which is really, really big because those things already have a huge impact, and now they're even bigger and you get a ton of them all the time. So you could play Grenadier Arbites with this, but there is a better use for this weapon and by extension the bolter, and that is bleed explosions. These weapons both have access to that puncture blessing as I was talking about, and there is currently an interaction that they just released a hotfix today and it wasn't in there, that when you use the dog detonation ability, the dog explosion, the left side blitz ability, and you have this weapon in your hand, it will apply bleed stacks for every electrocution proc to every enemy within that radius. So both of these weapons, if you have them out and you detonate the dog, every enemy that's near the dog is now going to be not only shocked and have damage done to them, but they're going to have 16 stacks of bleed applied to them almost instantly, and so everything will just start to die. And it's very, very, very powerful, and I have no idea if it's intended. But the fact that these weapons you don't require them to bring anything else in order to get that effect, other than having this weapon in your secondary and having the puncture blessing on it, which is already one of the best blessings on the weapon, and then you just have to have the dog explosion talent, which is a very, very solid blitz anyway. So you just get this for free for bringing these weapons in the range slot. And then let's talk finally about the bolter, as it is a meta choice. It's just the boss killingest of weapons, right? It has not only very solid damage, very solid crit damage, but it can scale that crit up to 25% further. It has access to the bleed explosions, which can apply to bosses as well, and it is just an absolute powerhouse, whether you're using it to snipe, because it insta kills most things. It has high stagger value, so you can open up bulwarks and stuff with it before you engage in them. But whether you're using it to snipe or go full auto on a boss's weak spot, whatever it is, it's just a very, very powerful, well-rounded weapon on the class. The only place it's going to fall down is it's very easy to consume all of the ammo very quickly. So you'll want to kind of spare, restrain yourself from going full auto all the freaking time. But definitely an S tier meta weapon that you've seen in a lot of my builds so far, and that's pushed even further when you consider the synergy with Dog Explosion and how you can just use that literally on a completely melee focused build like I ran on my stream last night. You can just do a completely melee focused build all about tanking and melee, and then just carry a bolter around with you and have the dog go explode stuff. Anytime stuff gets too thick, just have the dog go explode it and bleed it all to death. And there's the stuff. And that's the stuff, guys. That's why did I say stuff so many times? This is the whole tier list. So I hope you agree, or at least you found some interesting points to talk about down in the comments. We do have some serious winners, but this is what I'm really glad about, right? Look how many weapons are up here. We of course got the new dueling sword itself, the Mark III Arbites Shock Maul, but look how many weapons are in the standard to meta tiers, especially in the strong to end meta tiers. These weapons are all very usable, and there's tons here to make builds around and feel powerful. These weapons easily will clear Havoc 40, no problem, in your primary and secondary. You can use any of these and have a perfectly good game into Havoc 40, and that's what I like to see. You might argue that's because the class is OP. Whatever, go watch my other video on how OP the Arbites is if you think that's more your speed. But I think this is a great sort of layout for the weapons that we got. I really do hope we get a couple more in the future, and what I really, really hope is that a lot of these weapons from standard and down just need to be fully overhauled. The shotguns can probably stay where they are, but all these rapid fire guns, all these like gray hunks of fucking plasteel shit, they just need to be torn down and built back as something completely new, because they are worthless currently in my eyes. Anyway, you know who's not worthless? You, viewer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Mystery out. Bye.